to do with the TND overlay on Paoli Pike. It has nothing to do with the hanging proposal. So if you are here about the apartments or that the Hankins have proposed over across from Meadow, you're in the wrong place. That meeting will be on July 10th in front of the Planning Commission.
I don't see a mass exodus here.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
We're live.
We're live? Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Okay, Mark, would you like to lead the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. We're going to have a moment of silence for the brave men and women that protect us. Police, EMS, armed services everywhere throughout the world. Give them the force and the latitude to continue what they're doing. And God bless those that have given their life in the ultimate of our defense. Thank you. Mr. Shane, who I'm sure most of you know, had a slight medical problem. He's fine, he's home. Just had a little bit of a hip problem, so it's better off if he run around the room and be mad that he's not here. So we will miss him during this conversation.
All right. I'd like to announce that this meeting is being recorded. We will withhold public comments on non-agenda items until after the presentation. This is basically a one-topic meeting and a presentation by Tom Committa on the Paoli Pike Oceanville Traditional Neighborhood Development Overlay Districts. Tom, would you like to?
Good evening. My name is Tom Committa. I'm
Can't really hear you.
Yep, you're real close to
yeah.
it.
Good evening. My name is Tom Committa. I am a town planner and landscape architect from Westchester, PA. And a series of ideas were memorialized in an April 5, 2019 packet that was created in response to the comprehensive plan that the East Goshen Township Supervisors adopted a few years back, and the Paoli Pike Corridor Master Plan. And for the last year and a half, I was working with the East Goshen Township Planning Commission and staff to refine the text and design guidelines of this TND overlay district, which originally set out to be matching the boundaries that were identified and discussed during the comprehensive plan or the Paoli Pike Corridor Master Plan, but later on the good suggestions by members of the public, we differentiated the TND districts into two parts. We created a TND2 district on the east and west ends and TND1 district in the central. Currently, the area right here at the Township Building and along Paoli Pike between Wood Road and Route 352 is part of the commercial zoning and has either C2 or C5 designations, or in part BP Business Park. And so just a little history on TND overlay districts. So the state of Pennsylvania enacted Article Roman numeral 7A in August of 2000. So for the last 19 years, the TND statute has been quote unquote on the books. And Pennsylvania municipalities are enabled through Article 7A to create TND districts. There are options which include whether it's so-called outright district or whether it's an overlay district. And over the last 19 years, our firm, Thomas Commit Associates, has assisted 11 municipalities in Chester County with these TND districts. And of that number, 4 of them are outright districts and 7 of them are overlay districts. And the reason for that, in part, had to do with whether they were in boroughs or townships, the degree to which the decisions in the district might create a non-conformity on the current zoning, and in some cases, the existing land use. So for example, right up the street next to the Wawa is a property owner who has a single family detached home and from which certain business activity occurs, and they might be happy as a clam and for the next 50 or 100 years continue to operate just like they do today between the Wawa and this building. On balance, the Planning Commission felt that if there was an option whereby people could enjoy the benefits and the rights and privileges of TND, or just keep doing what they're doing, it's the best of all worlds. However, there were a couple of times during the process where members of the Planning Commission or members of the public said, well, if we really want to be vigilant about the TND district, why don't we just make it an outright district? Because otherwise there might be an unequal outcome whereby some of the perhaps underperforming and less pedestrian friendly frontages will continue to stay like that for many years. But I think the majority of the Planning Commission felt no harm, no foul, make it an option. If someone wants to enjoy other rights and privileges with new uses that would be permitted, then what's not to like about that? Time would tell. I mean, we could be in the room 10 or 20 years from now and say we had great outcome because a number of property owners chose to explore the option, or we could say nothing changed, that market conditions in East Goshen were such that on balance, people would rather do a restaurant in Westchester or Malvern rather than put a little cafe or restaurant in Goshenville. So time would tell. But I think on balance, because the comprehensive plan and the Paley Pike Corridor master plan both said, because there are so many great other neighborhoods around Goshenville, and Goshenville's zoning is already commercial, then maybe we could enhance the outcome, whether it be a streetscape outcome, an architectural outcome, a more pedestrian-friendly frontage outcome, so that we're not always auto destination uses and not always driving everywhere, that we imagine today that you could actually walk from what used to be Swiss Farms to maybe a repurposed Wawa to this building down to Goshen Village as a more neighborhood walkable place. Or if it never happened and Goshen Village was repurposed, maybe it would be a little bit more attractive and user-friendly. I think the repurposing of the bank to become the Dunkin' Donuts was just a little opportunity there. I remember when I asked my mother from Bellingham how she felt about the vacant bank being converted to the Dunkin' Donuts. She said, quote, "At least some of us can get out of this place and enjoy a cup of coffee in a location that we have not been able to enjoy otherwise." And if you've been at Bellingham, beside after the breakfast and they have the coffee and the juice bar, there's that little space that's less than the space between the dais and the front row where you could buy a banana or a greeting card, or maybe a soft drink, and basically that's it. So if you miss breakfast, you better call out, to get a beverage. Even though at Bellingham you need to get the jitney to take you over at Dunkin' Donuts, at least it's there. So if you were to say, well, who else has successfully implemented TND districts, whether they're outright or overlay districts, and nearby, in Charlestown Township in Duval, they enacted 5 TND overlay districts. TND 1 is the Spring Oak TND by J.P. Orleans. TND 2 is Pickering Crossing by J. Lowe and Associates. TND 5 is the commercial area where the P.J. Wellahans and the hotel now are. And you could go there and decide whether you think the outcome, architecturally, streetscape, and from a walkability standpoint, was better than what would otherwise be permitted. In Kennett Township, they enacted a TND overlay district. The beneficiaries are next to the borough of Kennett Square. In Lidditz Borough, they enacted a TND ordinance, and Warwick Woodlands, an age-qualified community, kind of like Bellingham, is under construction as a very interesting mixed-use walkable neighborhood. In West Bradford Township, Marshallton Walk. So if you're driving on the Strasburg Road and you're in West Bradford, just about 3 blocks down from the Oyster Bar and 4 Dogs, not the Oyster Bar, East Coast, 4 Dogs in the Marshallton Inn is the Lennar Marshallton Walk. It's a 13-unit, single-family, detached, and some attached units there. In Westchester Borough, that actually did the TND statute in 1995, Paxson Park, which is on Dean Street between Brandywine and Bradford Avenue, built by Short Brothers, is a TND district. So there are a number of places in and around the area that went from whatever zoning they previously had to the TND overlay district. And I think since the so-called packet has been stable, as I was thinking about what is the purpose of this meeting, I think there could be a couple different outcomes. In a cover memo that Mark sent after the April 5th packet to the board, Mark said, well, board, if you feel generally comfortable with the draft, maybe we would have a public workshop and just have a more participatory session and have the public ask questions, make comments, look at exhibits and so forth. And that was one option. Another option is there might be some provisions in there, since it was mostly prepared by TCA and the Planning Commission, about which the board has questions. And you might say, well, why don't we add some definitions? Why don't we add some clarity? Why don't we change this or change that? In which case, I could come back next month, with an updated packet. I suppose another option, even though the Planning Commission recommended that you would approve it, because we went through 9 drafts, you could send it back to the Planning Commission and say, we want you to do more homework on such and such. I mean, obviously, you have that prerogative. Or you could say, Tom, of the other 11 TND ordinances, since this is the 12th, what do you think about it? And I would say, this is the best one I ever prepared. And then you could say, we agree, we're going to set up a hearing in September, and then, we can decide, if we're going to tease out anything else. So the board has several options on how to proceed. But I would say maybe at the 3-quarter mark, Rick and Mark thought that Kristen Camp, the township solicitor, needed to have another set of eyes on it. And fortunately, Kristen had identified better connections between definitions and terms of art, better ways to look back at the parent ordinance and say, is the parent ordinance clear on what it says you can do in C1 and C5 and BP? What does this mean? Should some of the provisions in zoning move over to subdivision and land development in case that there needs to be any waivers or modifications? So I think Kristen's review strengthened in two subsequent drafts, the content of it. But I think that now would be the time that I would be happy to answer any questions, or they could be the overarching again on whether it should be outright or overview, or any kind of like specific question about a definition. Because if I were to go through a complete exhaustive presentation, it would take about 4 hours. And I don't think you're not familiar with it because it's been out since April the 5th, but I would be happy to either entertain process questions about what should be the next step or content questions. So anyway, time's yours.
So when you do an overlay as opposed to an outright, there need to be incentives. So it looks like it comes with a carrot and a stick, right? So the stick being any change of occupancy or expansion of existing buildings. The carrot being incentives for developers that would enhance their ability to do some things that would allow them to have an effective development. With your experience in other TND outrights and overlays, we have a strong enough stick and enough carrots to make the overlay option make sense in your experience?
Sure, good question. Indulge me 1 second. Just because of the technical part of the question about overlay district, if there's someone in the audience that is not familiar with it, I would like to just explain a little bit. So if you ask yourself the question, where are overlay districts from, and give some examples? Well, if you look at the zoning map for East Ocean Township, it doesn't show the floodplain. And floodplain has been an overlay district since the 1970s. Some municipalities have steep slope as overlay districts. West Goshen has an airport noise overlay district. So what authority does a municipality have for overlay districts? And I'm getting to your incentives question in a minute, David, but let me first build a foundation and say, in section 605 of the state planning code on classifications, it says all districts shall be treated the same except that existing districts can have additional regulations for the purpose of making transitional provisions at boundaries, regulating non-conforming uses, and regulating, restricting, or prohibiting uses and structures at, along, or near. And now I'm going to read 7 examples. Major thoroughfares, interchanges. Number 1, bodies of water. Number 2, steep slope. Number 3, public buildings. Number 4, airports. Number 5, you're going to love this one. Number 6, places having unique historical, architectural, or patriotic interest or value. So Historic Goshen Bill 1724, does it rise to the level that it should be treated differently with more delicate pedestrian-friendly outcome? Planning Commission thought yes. And number 7, floodplains. So in terms of incentives, my honest answer is there are not enough incentives that we would come back to Goshenville 10, 20, 30 years from now and say, nirvana. The place changed from an auto-oriented to this walkable, skip-back village. I don't think it's going to happen because we were a little timid with the incentives. And I think in large part, the members of the public who came to the first couple meetings beat the crap out of me and said, we don't want TND1 in our backyard. That's why I caved in and wimped out on you to put the 2 TND2 districts in. And then I also wimped out in the middle because I didn't want to fight the fight to say the building should be taller. And that would be the only real incentive, because the delta or the difference between building and impervious coverage now in C2 and C5 and the little bump of like 5 or 10%, if I owned the property and it was like ready to fall down, I would definitely go TND because I'd have to redevelop the property and I'd have to start from scratch. So why not do something a little bit bigger that had a little bit more uses? But if I own the school across the street and I'm as happy as a clam and I don't need to expand, I'm not changing. So I don't think there are enough incentives, and maybe the public is very happy with that because in your mind's eye, you're not going to see a big change. You might see it in Goshen Village because it's already level and asphalt and so forth. And if they wanted to repurpose it, they could come up with a really cool outcome, but they might be afraid of like relocating the tenants while they're reconstructing the center. Places like, well, other places who have been repurposed have been able to relocate people temporarily and then move them back in. Or here would be an example. In Concord Township, I didn't put it on a list because it's a little different. I wrote the Concordville Village Overlay District. And so if you're at the corner of Route 1 and 322, the SunEast Federal Credit Union sits at the northeast corner there. In the ordinance, just like all the other TND ordinances, I had the building come up closer to the sidewalk. But SunEast would then have to demolish the building and interrupt service. So they came in for a zoning hearing board variance and they said, we'll do anything that you ask for. We're going to build a new bank in the back at a greater setback so that we can build a new bank. And one day we'll shut the lights off, move into the new bank and demolish the old bank. And if you go down there, there's a very handsome welcome to Concordville sign, series of piers, street trees, sidewalk, hedges there. One of the images in the design guidelines is from that bank. And so the second best outcome was to create this streetscape enhancement. So the zoning hearing board in Concord granted SunEast a variance on the strength of their ability to recommend these other enhancements along the front. So in the case of SunEast, David, there was more of an incentive to create a heroic outcome. Then CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, they did the same thing down at Concordville. Because the gas utility line runs along their frontage, they couldn't put the building on it. So they moved the CHOP back and they did another extension of the sidewalk, street light, piers, fence, hedge, and so forth. So at that intersection, it's actually quite different than what used to be there with the Ethan Allen furniture store that had a big parking lot. But in terms of Rome wasn't built in a day, putting your toe in the water, having to start somewhere. I think the modest incentives that we did give are just enough to interest someone, but I don't think the cumulative effect is great enough that we're going to see Skip Back Village. You may not want to see Skip Back Village. I'm only using that as an example because when they transformed, they didn't transform 1 or 2 buildings at a time. You can just walk from one end of the block to the other, and it's all little boutique shops there. But I think Goshen Village, on balance, they have some unbuilt capacity, and they might be one of the main players or interests for this concept. But I would say this, if I were a supervisor and I was trying to just say, what would I do next? There's no downside risk to doing the TND ordinance, because everybody can do what they can do today. They can do it forever. They don't have to read one sentence of it. And the value added is that it's going to look better than it does today. So what's not to like about it? I mean, there is absolutely no downside risk. It's not like you're going to have like excess traffic or increased stormwater or whatever, because all the controls that are in place would still be in place. The other thing is the depth isn't that great. So because even this lot on which the township building sits, it's not that great. So really the property that has the most elbow room is Goshen Village, where you could rearrange certain things. Otherwise, if a bank goes out of business and a boutique shop goes in, it might be 10% bigger, but as you're driving 45 miles down the road, you might not even notice it. When the Paley Pike Trail happens from East High School to the park, then I think there would be a little bit more synergy between a pedestrian walkway and other little shops and stores. So anyway, yes, Tom.
Tom, I have one question, but it's like in 3 different phases, and I'm probably going to foul them up. When you consider this section of East Goshen Township, which I sort of have always, for 40-some years, have called a gateway.
Yes.
We have an architecture that was designed and allowed by past boards. Fine. I understand wanting to get up into the modern world. We are going through pains, and even with a lot of grants, there's going to be a lot of financial responsibility to making sure this trail gets through for those that are going to use it, and more importantly, for the people that are going to replace me, right? And others, that you have access to the trail. I understand that the shopping center does have room for some growth. I won't say improvement, let's call it growth. 352, where we have a vacant building right now, plus the restaurant behind it. I realize that could be something in the future, but don't you want to go through East Goshen, drive through East Goshen, come home? I always worked in East Goshen all my life, so I never had to go to Philadelphia. But I can imagine coming home after seeing Lancaster and after seeing some of the areas that you talked about, Westchester Borough, it's gorgeous, but that is a walking community. I just don't see this particular strip, other than a few buildings, getting any kind of density that's going to drastically change the area. So it comes up in my mind, why open the book to have unreasonable construction? And let me quantify that to the public. I always feel reasonable construction is, number one, anybody that owns land has the right to sell it. They don't have the right to get more for it, and in my opinion, to max out a township unless they're allowed to by code, by ordinance, and that's why we've done that. In general, aren't we ruining the sector of the road in hopes that we're going to have maybe a little bit, maybe another store, possibly a whatever it might be, but the viewscapes that we're going to be losing, along with what could be happening right down the road, is going to ruin, in my opinion, this section of the township, and you'll never get it back.
Well,
It wasn't done for applaud, so I'm just saying that.
so, Carmen, do you have, are there 2 other things you wanted to?
Well, they were intertwined,
Okay.
at the financial end of it. I'm trying to put my mind into a developer. And if you're going to give me incentives, if I'm going to come in and take a risk on something that isn't market driven meaning there's not a big market for some of these areas out here, someone's going to have to front the money for me. And I'm going to come to East Goshen and say, well, hey, why don't you front the money, and then when I'm up and running, you'll get it back, which, no, that's a definite no check. Number two, are they going to come in and start competing with each other to where we start to get, I can't even explain it, but it's just an uncomfortable vision of this area. I can't quantify uncomfortable vision, but in my mind, some of these pictures are gorgeous in Westchester and gorgeous in Malvern and gorgeous in a lot of places. I don't think they're gorgeous on Paoli Pike, 352, and the road corridor.
So I guess 3 or 4 points. So I've been doing whatever I've been doing for 46 years. And in 1999, I was asked by the Borough of Westchester to be on a team to design the bicentennial garage, which is just south of the Farmers and Mechanics building, 2 buildings south of the courthouse. And someone said, no one in their right mind would put a parking garage in downtown Westchester. And so I showed slides of parking garages in Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina. And our team, which had 4 firms, designed the bicentennial garage. And in 1999, we won the international award, US and all the other countries, for best aesthetics and facility design. Now, what happened the first year is they lost money because they didn't know it was a parking garage, because it looked like normative buildings on High Street. So we had to put out a P sign and a sandwich board sign that says park here, and then got a little bit of play. But as you know, the running shoe store and Clutch Chocolate and the little smoothie shop is in there, and it's kind of seamless. Also in 1999, the unincorporated village of Claymont, Delaware, which I thought was one of the most underperforming areas along Route 13 outside of Wilmington. They had pretty much just given up hope on Philadelphia Pike. And I wrote the hometown overlay district for Newcastle County Department of Land Use. The Wawa that went in at Harvey Road at Philadelphia Pike, the McDonald's across the street, the only 2-story Dunkin' Donuts in North America outside of the city, and Darley Green across from Archmere were all built under the hometown overlay district ordinance. And at an earlier meeting, I offered on some Saturday to get in a bus and take you on a tour of all the places that people thought, not in our lifetimes would this be enhanced or improved. And it's taken about 20 years, but it's happening. So I think the threshold question for the supervisors is it a trade up or a trade down? And that, I don't have a vote, so you have to make that decision. If you think on balance that the cumulative text and design guidelines of the ordinance will produce a higher value trade up, then you should vote for it. If you think that it won't, then you should vote against it, or you should punt on it and say, we're not ready to take action. So it's your choice, and you have to do the weighing of what the options are. So
Tom, okay, hold on, I'm not done, Mike, I'm sorry. That brings up the part of the question that was sort of in the mud. Isn't competition and demand going to take care of that? If Janet's realty company finds out that there's a big market for Tom Committa's salt ice cream in East Goshen, then they're gonna buy something and they're gonna go through conditional use. They're gonna try to put something in, but let the market demand it instead of us trying to drive the market. Because it sounds like that we are trying to drive the market to say you're coming here when it may not be the best opportunity. As example, we have one at the corner. I, for one, said that the fellow would never make it in business, and I've never told anybody that, and it's been vacant for how many years?
Okay, so in 1991, I was invited by the Senate Select Committee on Land Use, state of Pennsylvania, to testify and say what, in my opinion, was needed to the municipality's planning code to produce better results, because they had from 1968 to 91 to gauge the success of the municipality's planning code adopted in 1968. And so I testified at the Oakland's Corporate Center in West Whiteland, and I said that I thought we needed a more neighborhood type statute. It took us 9 years to get that adopted in August of 2000, and I worked with State Representative Robert Freeman to do the last lap of the amendments that eventually were adopted. The Senate Select Committee in '91 said, we're seeing the results of the 1970s, 80s suburbanization, and we're not in Kansas anymore, and we're not liking what we're seeing. So do you have any ideas? So that fermented in '91. 9 years later, the statute went into place. 19 years later, we're in this room. So it's really kind of a value judgment. When I was interviewed about 6 years ago for the comprehensive plan, I was told that I think East Goshen Township was a premier community. And I said, not yet. And I said, there's, whether it's walkways, riparian buffers, additional farmland preservation, enhancing the ordinances, making Goshenville more walkable. There are other initiatives that could be spotlighted and in fact are in the comprehensive plan. And so it's really a planning process. It's a process where you have to decide if you're happy with what's here or you think that there's a better way to do it. And some municipalities are still waiting to do something with Article 7A and others have. So it's completely a discretionary legislative act, and that's why we're here tonight.
No, that's all right. I wanted to pick up from with your comments, Carmen. They echo with some of the sentiments that I have. This place of Goshenville and the vision we're trying to steer. I don't want to be a person who is not interested in vision, but with what we have to our east in the form of Malvern, not far down Paoli, I know you have to drive there. Someday more people will have electric or battery operated bikes and be able to do some things a little bit more distance. And to the west, we have the borough, the West Goshen Shopping Center. This past year, we decided that we were not going to continue the farmers market after a 7 or 8 year run because of the competition on either side, east and west, that we were usurping the vendors, and you lost inertia with them disappearing, and obviously your clients, your citizens were not going to the market, and it wilted. I've had a lot of ambivalence about the Goshenville Town Center since I've come on the board. With, again, Carter's sentiments accurate, that it seems forced. Now, when I hear you say, because I don't know whether the uniqueness that we see in these places of Malvern and Westchester can ever be duplicated here. This is a very suburban environment, and I don't know that the market is ever going to gravitate here in at least a generational time period, looking at 20, 25 years. When you say that the overlay district can serve as another set of options and that there's no downside to it, I can be attracted to that. But I'm not behind the vision of the Goshenville Town Center. I just don't think it's the right fit in East Goshen. So I have my ambivalence continues. An overlay district that might provide some, again, more incentives with not necessarily an overabundance of carrots, but more options for the market to respond. I can appreciate that. But the big vision for East Goshen in this location, I don't see it. That said, I want to come back to your comment about a premier community. We are a premier community. Great leaders don't have every strength. They have certain things that rise up, and that can create greatness, but they don't have, nobody has it all. And so East Goshen can't necessarily have it all relative to the visions that some have. So again, I think we're sharing some of the same kind of thoughts, Carmen, in that context. If I'm,
But I need to add something if I could. I don't want to interrupt on anybody else, but I will. When you said not a premier township, I will take difference to that, and I'm not doing this to be a smart aleck. East Goshen is a premier township for what we have for, bless you, for some nice commercial area, possibly not enough for tax base, but nice commercial area. We have nice developments. We have very high, stable income in general. Market turns, we don't feel it like other people. We have good, responsible citizens that generally pay their tax bills. They enjoy driving through East Goshen Township. On a Saturday, what, I can't do this, you just saw me walk out of the room. What a lot of people do is they walk the corporate center because it's empty. We have open space galore Saturday and Sunday. You have to fight maybe for the playground a little bit because it's so popular. I'm just wondering if I understand the kind. I just can't envision a walking Paoli Pike other than the trail, possibly going to Dunkin' Donuts, a restaurant, a Wawa. We have a couple of, we have an Oriental, we have some other stuff. Competition is going to drive what's in there. All of a sudden, if people have a demand for a restaurant, the shopping center is going to somehow get a restaurant and somehow do something with parking. He's going to have to because the customers are going to demand it. Why should we go through this pain now? If it might happen 15 years later down the road, let the people sitting here and the new residents, and I'm not saying that to be smart, but let the new residents that are going to be paying the tax bill and also enjoying it, let them weigh in on the decision. Let the market drive what we have, and we obviously do have some properties that could use some improvement. You mentioned them. We have a residential next to the Wawa. It's like a blended use right now where they have a little bit of a landscape business and so forth. That may or may not change in the future. You can end up with some townhomes there. You can end up with possibly a very small business. That's great. I love that. But to carry this concept and use every piece of grass and bring everything forward now so we're closer to Paoli Pike and closer to the trail, I just personally don't think that's what East Goshen is as a premier township of 2019, in my opinion.
Yeah, so let me, if we were recording, I just need to respond to this so I'm not thrown under the bus. Excuse me. I have been in East Goshen Township off and on since the summer of 1955. I worked at my grandfather's 7.5-acre nursery off of Green Hill Road, which is now where Joshua Road cul-de-sac is, transplanting plants, planting trees, watering, weeding, pruning, etc. I'm very familiar with Goshenville since 1955, and a question would be about service areas. On the comprehensive plan, we took a lot of attention to what's in Westchester, what's at Uptown Worthington, what's in Malvern, and we looked at the uses there and we drew the service areas. And if you want to have a gelato and drive into Westchester on a Friday and sit outside of the Senso's Gelato instead of having one here, by all means do it. You could decide, let's keep the ordinance in a safe downstairs and bring it out 5 years from now. You could decide to do some of the little baby steps that are in here. You could enhance the Triangle Park at the next intersection. You could create little pedestrian pockets of like parklets, which are in the plan, and you could have pop-up retail in lieu of your farmer's market. You could do that as a trial balloon, see if there's any traction and any energy, any interest, and then later do something else. So when I said in the interview wasn't a premier community, I just said not yet. And since then, we did the master plan enhancement for the park and the playground design. The playground is a not yet feature. The Pelly Pike Trail is a not yet feature. I love East Goshen. My mom lived here. I worked here for about 15 summers. I want it to be as much as you want it to be. But if it's not the right time, it's okay. I'll be back if you ever needed me. That's all.
And Tom, that's not knocking your excellent work, because you're helping me and Charmin, all of us, understand what the vision is and understand what the potential is and understand what the groundwork is.
Yeah.
So that's, and I think we know each other.
Yeah, and I said in 1988, when I started representing the borough of Westchester, they said to me, is it a perfect town? That's the question they asked me. I said, not yet. We had 6 restaurants in 1988, now we have 56. So anyway, somebody else can be the judge. I'm sorry, Jen.
I have a slightly different view from Mike and Carmen. I've sat through many of these sessions with the Planning Commission, and the goal for Goshenville was not to build it up and make it into another Malvern or another Westchester borough. It was simply to, with the trail coming in and having more pedestrians, making it pedestrian friendly so the people of East Goshen and our neighbors can walk through, and if you're walking and it's a hot day, be able to step off the trail without going through a large parking lot and get yourself a glass of lemonade. We're not trying to build it up and make it into something it's not. We're trying to make it into something that is user-friendly and resident-friendly. And I don't see that what we're doing is trying to pull in developers. When we were going through this process and we were looking at multifamily homes with 4 stories and 5 stories, which is the only way the density makes sense, we said, no way. That's not East Goshen. So what Tom has done is not trying to change East Goshen. It's not trying to make us into something that we're not. It's trying to make us better than we are without changing East Goshen. And that was something that the Planning Commission was working on steadily, and that we insisted that Tom follow through. We started talking about Goshenville, maybe not by that name, a town center, 40 years ago. We talk about possibly having streetlights, enhancing the landscape, maybe putting some banners out to advertise welcoming to East Goshen. We're not looking to make a major change in what we are.
I thought that we were going to spend our evening asking questions, but it sounds like we're maybe talking about where our minds are right now and taking a position. So, because it's a public meeting and we're live, I'll say my 2 cents currently. So anyone who knows me knows that I bicycle all over the country, in fact, all over the world. And a lot of cycling I do on trails. I just got back from Minnesota, up north Minnesota, pretty desolate area, lake country, that has a trail called the Paul Bunyan Trail. And it runs through little towns like Jenkins Junction, Hackensack, Minnesota, Pequot Lakes, Walker, Baxter, Minnesota. Every one of those are small towns that probably wouldn't have survived had the trail not come through there. And every one of those little towns now have ice cream shops and boutiques and coffee shops, repurposed buildings, new construction, residential usage. And my view is, if we're putting a trail here that's going to connect the east side with the park, and everyone should know that both municipalities that border us on both sides in their new comprehensive plans have put pedestrian and bicycle trails connecting with our trail in their comprehensive plans. So if we want to build a corridor for the future that connects schools, the YMCA, the park, we need to think about what that corridor looks like. And right now, I'm sorry, I'll say this publicly, if you think the pepper mill and the Wawa and the logs and construction equipment and the abandoned Swiss farm are attractive for East Goshen, I'm in a different place. So that's my 2 cents.
But David, on the other hand, the market is going to drive what's done. I agree. There are some areas of the township that could definitely use some face uplifting. We're faced with a trail that we're starting to hit some additional money on that we're not done yet. And by the time we get done, I don't know where we're going to be. Now we're going to take that and we're going to throw this on top and maybe have to start getting in some additional expense. I would get the trail in first and make allowances. Let the market demand it from there. If Tom Committa's restaurant business sees that there are tons of people on that trail and that might be a good place to put a restaurant, no, by the way, we just got the availability of liquor licenses, the market is going to drive it.
My response would be, what we have now is market driven. And look what we have.
It's lack of market driven.
No, it's not.
It's opposite. No one wants to do anything because you've got the people there. The market, if there was someone that wanted to do something, they would be going in a second.
Carmen, the timing of it, I am perfectly happy to wait for, to make the little parks or to do the things that require money, because you're right, we're in a situation where finances are important. But if you put the TND in place, when someone decides to sell their ground now, if something, someone died and all of a sudden we have a property that's ready to be sold, that person could move it up close to where the trail is going to be, instead of being forced to stay on the old zoning. I'm not suggesting we do all the improvements now, but the whole reason we tried to do this at this point in time is in case some property came up for sale, that new owner would be able to take advantage of the new design standards.
Janet, that's an excellent point. David, you made excellent points as well. And in offering the comments that I shared, and echoing what Tom had said, the TND, the traditional neighborhood development options, the overlay options, are just that. They're providing another layer of opportunity for the market to take advantage. I'm not as concerned with setbacks as much. I guess my biggest difficulty as an individual is seeing the vision and whether the market is really going to come to that vision. But providing the overlay options, since it's not going to hurt one way or the other, it's just providing a few more opportunities that aren't excessive density or unusual to what is here already that could be better, provide new opportunities. I'm in general support of that. So if that was misconstrued, it's just that I'm not sure when anything is really going to happen that creates whatever the look was that we have on the one paper of what Goshenville is to look like in the future. I can't see that. But the foundation work with the ordinance changes, I think that's reasonable. We can't be hurt necessarily by it, and it could enhance the market opportunities. And that's what drives us, other than the control that zoning has, which is often constricted.
Then why don't we go ahead and put, instead of overlay, just put new zoning in? Instead of an overlay district, put new zoning in that's going to meet with what you're talking about, the potential future of what could be happening, and go ahead and zone for it now and be done with it, instead of having open doors.
But don't you have more opportunity with just providing another layer with this without revamping all the base zoning?
I don't know
The
if it's
fear is-
opportunity or ruination, to be truthful. I'm just,
The fear is grandfathering. If we change the zoning to just what the TND is, then we have a lot of properties that are non-conforming,
That's it.
and the rules for non-conforming properties are different,
they are.
and it could cause a lot of difficulty in the future. That's the whole advantage to having an overlay rather than new zoning. And I don't see any other real advantage to doing it that way. But if you change the zoning outright, you have a lot of properties that won't conform.
Yeah, a couple other thoughts as you're.
And as you finish that up, Tom, and Madam Chair, if we could, we don't have any deadline here. So that as Tom finishes his comments, if you would concur, Janet, then we open it up to the residents and have
I was waiting for the board to finish
to
their
close our
comments, and then
documents.
as soon as we close our mouths, then I will open it up to the audience.
So I just have one other comment. I have to zoom up to the 50,000 foot level. When we were working on the comprehensive plan update, we asked ourselves the question, what are the mixed use places in East Goshen Township? And we said it's Route 3 and Goshenville. Now the business parks are zone BP, and they're primarily offices or light manufacturing. And so we said, is there a different future for the Route 3 commercial and for Goshenville? And we said, probably. We said, however, because of the enormous width of the right-of-way of Route 3 and the car washes and the limousine store or shop and the other businesses there, it might be a heavier lift in our lifetimes to transform the Route 3 corridor. So we said, as did the 1992 and another comprehensive plan between the 2015 and the 1992 plan, they all looked at Goshenville as a possibility to enhance. Now, some of the members of the Planning Commission are here, and I just wanted to harken back to one of the meetings where we were juggling several agenda items, one of which was change in the residential zoning in the northern portion of the township. So one night we had to deal with the changes to what I'll call cluster development regulations and TND2 in Goshenville. And the Planning Commission said, it is not appropriate to have any changes as a result of these cluster developments anywhere, Hershey's Mill, up by Immaculata, whatever. Where better in the township would there be to have a continuation of the mixed use? We have an institutional use, we have commercial use, we have residential use, we have offices, we have retail stores, and so forth. So is there any gold in their hills in Goshenville that has a promise for a different outcome? So when we zoomed out, we kind of, I hate to say it, gave up on Route 3, and we said, we can nurture this little asset that we have as Goshenville. And that's how we kind of like concluded that as a planning commission, we were going to say no to, I'm just making, like, I'm not a voting member of the planning commission. Planning commission was not going to lean in favor of the change cluster ordinance, but really in favor of enhancing Goshenville. So anyway, times public.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, I will open it up to the audience. We are recording this, so if you have something to say, please step up to the microphone, give your name and address, and please make your comment.
Dan, come on up.
You want to tell them the time?
We are closed, this meeting is going to be done by 8 o'clock.
This microphone?
Yes. It will
The one
be,
downstairs, there's a microphone right by the outside.
Sometimes we used to have one out there in the middle.
Welcome, Dan.
Thanks. So I didn't totally follow.
name and address.
Dan Truitt, 1430 Grand Oak Lane. didn't follow 100% of that presentation, but the gist of it that I got was, if we enact a zoning change to bring in this TND district, we open the door for taller buildings
No,
closer to the street.
closer to the street, yes, not tall.
Okay, and that kind of fits in with my thinking is in line with what Carmen was thinking. I moved here 25 years ago to get away from the congestion and the traffic and the density of Delaware County. And the last thing I want to see here is anything that opens the door to more people packed into a smaller place, more traffic and so forth. I understand what you're saying, that, oh, all we're doing is allowing them to move it closer to the street, but moving it closer to the street makes it feel tighter. It's just, I agree with Carmen, I don't think that's
Well,
East Goshen Township.
Dan, the whole point is we are putting a trail in. And we're talking about an area from 352 to Boot Road. We're not talking about the whole length of Paoli Pike for this district, but we're putting the trail in. We're going to have pedestrians and bike riders on the trail. And the whole point is over in this section to be able to move things closer so people can walk into establishments.
Okay,
It's not
But-
increasing the density.
if you have the kind of person who's gonna walk on a trail, you think walking across a parking lot is a big deal for them?
Well, depending on the traffic there and the cars, it's safer if you don't have to walk across that Wawa parking lot. If any of you have ever walked across that Wawa parking lot, you are taking your life in your
But they're already gonna have to walk across that Wawa parking lot going in the perpendicular direction, right?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, I mean,
They'll cross it anyway.
I mean,
Is that
just in summary, what I'm
Wawa?
trying to say is,
One person at a
I
time.
think when you start to bring buildings up closer to the road, it changes the feel
Mhm.
of that area. And I can also see it, that now we're saying, oh, we're not gonna go any taller, but that'll be the next step. Then people will say, hey, we wanna put taller.
They already said that, and we said no.
And keep in mind that the ordinance is written has some offsets, so you're not gonna have just a straight brick wall for that length. So first of all, you got the shopping center, they're not moving that up to the street line. You have the township building, it is what it is, it's where it is right now, and it's not moving. So what we're really talking about is from the township building, east, basically, it would be what we're talking about. And there is in the ordinance some offset so that from an architectural perspective and an aesthetic perspective, it could be staggered and you wouldn't just see a plain, wall for the whole length. So it's considered in the design.
I would prefer to see us slam the door on anything that would cause higher density or a radical change in the look and feel of the center of East Goshen. Since I've been here for 25 years, I kind of like it the way it is. I remember shortly after I first moved here, hearing Marty Shane say one time that we're built out. And for me as a resident, I thought, great, thank God, they won't be packing more buildings in and around and so forth. So
Thank
please,
you.
let's try to keep it that way.
Anyone else come up to the microphone, please?
Yes, as this young lady's coming to the microphone, if you haven't had a chance yet to read even the executive summary of the Chester County Landscapes 3 Comprehensive Plan, has anybody had a chance to peruse it? Michael, I know you have. But, it's worth taking a look at because what the Chester County commissioned by the commissioners of Chester County to the County Planning Commission to update the comprehensive plan. They're envisioning over the next generation, 25 years or so, about another 150,000 people in Chester County. About another, I think it was 50 or 60,000 housing units and another 70-some thousand jobs. So, and so we're already at 500,000. We know what our friction points are everywhere we go with our circulation. There's going to be more of it. So, Dan, I definitely hear what you're saying. And build out communities still can change. They can, their tear downs, build ups, and depending on how the zoning and land use underlying controls go, there can be more opportunities depending on how the governing body and the municipalities handle those kind of things. So there is a lot more coming, whether it comes to East Goshen or not. in our wider breadth of where we're going in our county, we're gonna see lots more neighbors in the future. And there's only so much infrastructure and dollars for infrastructure we're gonna be able to. Look at how long we've waited and still have no changes with Route 202 and 926, the intersection there in Westtown. It's a disaster, but it's been eroded over time when you have a limited access expressway, which was what 202 was supposed to be, when you begin to cut it up with traffic signals. And now we're at a point where to change that intersection dramatically, $100 million. Major dollars, and we're not gonna have the money to do that. Another example is one we just had a recent public meeting with our neighbors in East Whiteland Township about the intersection of King Road and 352. Are you familiar with that? It's not a perpendicular, it's kind of a diagonal intersection. And a consideration that's been initiated by East Whiteland to alter that intersection. Possible cost as much as $2 to $3 million. So some residents that were in attendance when we were at Immaculata College for that well-populated meeting said we can identify another 10 intersections that could stand the same improvements. We're only gonna be able to do so much over time. So the more we can manage what we have, and if there's a vision, I think it needs to be grounded in, where we've been, where we want to go, and not exceed what we have the resources to do, let alone the expectations and the service we want to provide to residents. So,
Please, if you can't reach the,
You can just pull it down.
you can pull it down.
We have to talk fairly close to it.
My name's Mary Wilson. I live at 406 Summit House. We lived in Newtown Square for many, many years. And when all that construction we knew it was coming in, we knew it was going to be really difficult traffic-wise. We moved out, and obviously we're here. And the construction was awful. I've had to go back there many times for different reasons. And my neighbors were saying it's awful. The sewer system, it's put a burden on the schools and everything. Now, our one daughter, she lived in Exton, where they had those townhomes, the Rankin building, I think, in Ryan or something. And she had a storefront herself. And I want you to know that the storefronts just don't make out at all. She had to leave. She couldn't keep her business. And there's a lot of people in that group there. The only one that I know that's still there is the pharmacy.
It's interesting. We, in the course of doing this, we spoke to some people from, what's government? Neil Fisher from Hankin gave us a talk discussing what kind of businesses can survive here without the major development that we're not willing to see. And he basically told us restaurants. That he agreed that the little boutiques have a lot of trouble getting, surviving. But when they built out the little shopping area in Eagleview,
That's where she was.
they tried all sorts of little businesses which failed. And so now it's kind of restaurant row. They have put all sorts of restaurants in there. And so that's why now that we are no longer a dry township, it is the hope that that is the type of business that might come, because that would be useful to the pedestrians.
I think the walking traffic won't be. You won't have the walk traffic here. I wouldn't want to walk here. I just can't see it. If I want to walk somewhere, I'm going to go to East Goshen to park. I don't think it's suitable here to go walking. I just don't.
Well, thank you.
I do agree, Janet. I do agree, and I did say restaurants would be a good idea. I don't like the rest of it, the little boutiques and everything else that we're
It won't
throwing in
make it.
there. I have to agree. That's what negatively affected me.
I agree,
Thanks.
Tom.
Thank you very much.
Yes. David Andrews,
Ray Harkness, 17 Conjunction Downs.
who is part of our planning
It's part of the planning commission. Thank you. I just had a question listening today. When you look at the Peoria Park part of it, you talk about a town center. And it was asked to create a town center. And some of the comments heard today are, I'm asking the question, what do you mean by town center? How would you expect that to occur? This is one way to do that. I guess I'd be interested what your thoughts are and how you think that was going to occur.
You asking me?
Well, I'll make a comment. I mean,
Town center has two definitions in my mind. True town center to me would be the borough of Westchester, gorgeous borough of Malvern, many places that Tom Committa had talked about. Town centers generally are an area where you would walk from this township building. You're going to get on our trail and you're going to go somewhere, and you're going to have a conglomerate, a little bit of your stores. This is where you're possibly going to have the little ice cream store you're talking about. You're going to have a restaurant, and you're going to have what they just did next to the Devon Horse Show. What they did next to the Devon Horse Show is a little bit of a town center to me, where everything is self-contained, so that, and it's right before Waterloo Road. Once you get there and you park, you can walk virtually all the way around it. I think there's one, possibly two restaurants in there. There are a couple of boutiques, but it's what I call a Michael, come on, give me a word. It's self-contained. It's a self-contained area.
It's defined as a unified development, that's what was allowed, that's the definition in the ordinance for that order.
But it has enough interest that people can.
But you don't have to have all of Pele Pike doing it. You walk up Pele Pike on your park system, and for example, you go into the Goshen, man, I'm losing it. Go into the shopping center, the Leslie Goshen Village. You go into Goshen Village, and you would have maybe some restaurants and so forth there. Then you walk a little bit further, and you go past the bank, and you go past the township building, and possibly where the logs are, David. Then you might have another restaurant that happened to take over wherever. It doesn't have to be contiguous all the way down. Town center to me is someplace where you walk and you're there. 2 blocks in Westchester, you can virtually do almost anything that you want to do, from dining to, I guess, partying to a couple of stores. You can buy records. That's a town center. Ours is more of a unified district. What Chris, I was looking for the words, that was tremendous. You get a raise tonight.
But that's on one tract of ground, not done by one person.
I understand
So
that.
on that one tract of ground, it's a redevelopment project to allow and integrate mixed use, residential with commercial, with parking, with everything.
And that's what I would like. That's what I think would blend here, so that when you're driving home, you still have your open space. You still have some green, buildings back a little bit to where they're not up against the road, but you have little satellite areas where you can go depending on what you want to do.
so
That's a rural town center to me.
do you think
An
the
example
existing-
of that, excuse me, and one example that popped into my mind that I was thinking about is the current version of what's called Peddler's Village up in Bucks County, where there are all sorts of shops. You can park in one location and you walk around. There are restaurants and all these little cute boutique shops.
So do you think,
Alaska.
that the current ordinance would support that? Is that what you're saying?
No, the problem is that, that is something you can do when you have a property with a single owner, or you have undeveloped land, and if we did this 40 years ago, although a lot of buildings were here 40 years ago, in this area, but that's something you can do before the area is developed. Now, when we have all these buildings already, when we have things that are developed, yes, you can have redevelopment, but you can't organize it to the extent that Carmen is suggesting. It just doesn't work at this point of time in this location.
So if we were to move forward in 1A town center, what is it you think needs to be done to make that happen? Do you have to have an ordinance change? Or do you think there's some other way that we could, that's in the comprehensive plan of the road? Yeah, I'm not saying it's not bad ideas and not bad comments. My question is, how do you just get from point A to point B if you want that to occur?
I don't know, or we as a local government can do that, and at the same time I'm saying that, I'm thinking of the Exton Town Center. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, Exton had this, the West Whiteland Township had a vision, and it showed very clearly in their comprehensive plans of creating a town center that what we would still, those of us been around the crossroads, the Exton Crossroads of 130. That somehow they were able to create that with the momentum. It was, they created a comprehensive plan, they put it into zoning, and the developers came. That vision came together pretty amazingly quickly. And of course, we think right now, if you know where West Whiteland Township is and the breadth of it, right now they have 1,600 new apartments and condominiums under construction, not just permitted, but under construction, right around the town center. You talk about suburban urban density, there you're going to see it there fully manifested within the next 3 to 5 years. Is it a bad thing? No, but it is how that the way that constructed there, the way the market came together to respond to that zoning, I think was pretty amazing. Do I visit it on occasion? Yeah. Do I want to live there? I don't think so. But I feel the same way about New York. I love to visit for a day, but I'm ready to get out when it's done. Here, I don't know that we can do anything with our zoning. Coming back to your question, coming with our zoning at this point in time to create such market interest that we're going to transform, even in a 15 or 20 year period, this corridor from Boot Road to 352. So I'm not sure what we can do other than what Tom is suggesting and you guys have been looking at in these TNDs.
So, you know, is the vision still to have a town center? And if it's not, we can't see how to get there. Should we change the Paley pipeline?
I think there is a vision there, in my view. We met with, we had breakfast with small businesses in East Goshen. We had breakfast with large businesses in East Goshen. We asked them what they want and how can we be a more effective body and support what they need. And our friends over in the corporate center all said they really like this idea of connectivity with the trail. In fact, they want the corporate center connected to the trail so that people can walk from the corporate center into the area. The other thing they brought up was there are no restaurants. They have to get in a car and they've got to drive to restaurants. There's, you know, we have the Oriental Pearl. That's it, right? So, so what I think is going to happen from Neil's comments from Hankin is that our town center, from a market perspective, will be restaurant, coffee shop, personal services, and offices, professional offices. And that'll create a town center. And it'll be supported by the corporate park. And then again, when we connect to the other adjoining townships, that's what I see happening, probably not in my lifetime, but that's what I think of from a visions perspective. I think we could have a nice town center here that would support the residents. And I'm telling you, I've seen it happen. I sat on the advisory board of the Rails to Trails Conservancy in the Mid-Atlantic, and the Build It and They Will Come works. You put a trail in, people object to the trail at first, then it's put in, and then the residents say, how can I connect my neighborhood to the trail? Because I want to get down and on the trail. And they start, and there's a lot of skepticism now about that happening, but I've seen it over and over and over again for the last 30 years. It happens, and people get converted. If you're building a new housing development anywhere in Chester County today, what's the first thing that people want? Sidewalks and walking trails. The first thing they build. Go over to Chapel Hill on Devon Road. Beautiful walking trail that circumnavigates that whole development. First thing they put in. Over to the one off of 352. That used to be the DuPont property. Unbelievable trail system all through that facility. So I'm just, you know,
Same thing with the Abbey on Garvey Paoli.
Yeah,
I think
so-
it's Garvey Paoli.
So my vision would be the trail, other towns should start hooking up. We drive restaurants, coffee shops, personal services, and professional offices into a town center that people can walk.
That's a good vision, and I'm with you on that.
Yeah,
That's
thank you
a
very
good-
much.
That's a good vision.
Hi, Michelle Truitt, 1430 Grand Oak Lane. I live in a premier neighborhood, by the way. I agree with Carmen. I'm not really sure that I really support that Gaylord corridor overlay at this point. I'm curious to know though, I know that our corporate park right now, the Goshen Corporate Park is almost 100% occupied. So wouldn't that be kind of a good location for a town center? So as some of those buildings become unoccupied, wouldn't that be a good option to have, potential growth for a town center right in there?
In the Goshen corporate.
In the Goshen Corporate Park, as buildings become available, is that something that could happen?
The zoning there is BP, which is business park.
Right,
At this point in time, unless you totally change the zoning, it does not have commercial areas
okay,
for like a restaurant or something like that. And the buildings are on 4-acre lots.
right,
So going from one building to another building would require a lot of walking. And, for what we're, and for the whole idea, according to the Chester County plan, the trail is where the Chester County said it ought to be.
But let's answer her question. Michelle, yes, you could. You could change the zoning. If Kristen could buy that entire park tomorrow
right.
at lock, stock, and barrel,
Right.
and she had a market plan analysis that seemed to work, she could hire attorneys, she could do it, hire Tom Committa, hire 40 or 50 attorneys. You could change the zoning, that's not impossible.
Right.
So that is an answer to your question.
Okay,
Would you want to? That just smacked
I
you
don't know.
right in the head.
that's why I don't know.
I don't even have an answer for that, but you could change the zoning with proper support and the residents agreeing and so forth.
Right.
You could do that, and virtually in a dream world, that could be a town center. If you could acquire the property, you could put in some pretty massive town centers with a lot of parking,
Right.
so that you could park. That's a
And still
wonderful
have,
idea,
the access to the trail,
wonderful idea, but I think
probably not.
changing the zoning, I think that may take a long time. There's a lot of challenges with
Okay.
that.
I was just thinking location wise, it seems like it would be an ideal location in the township.
It would have been nice before the corporate park was
Of
developed.
course.
Michelle, but it depends on how do you define a town? How are you defining a town center?
I envision a self-contained area where there would be parking available and a new number of different mini-cluster buildings in the vicinity of and ease of parking is gonna be important. But self-contained and not really up close to a major street. I'm concerned about pedestrians along the major street here of Paley Pike. I'm also concerned about like with the Paley Pike overlay that we're discussing here tonight that's been presented. I'm also concerned that I lost my train of thought.
But,
But I do have concerns about it being so close to the Paley Pike and for pedestrian safety and for even ease of getting into these parking areas and getting out of the parking area safely. We already have so much congestion with pipeline traffic. We have Aqua, we have Pico. You can't go down Paley Pike through Malvern without being stopped and
Well, but
rerouted.
that's temporary at the moment.
And Ubro, but the thing is, my
That's
point,
temporary.
but my point is there's always construction going on.
But if you're looking at East Coast Town Center.
Right.
I would argue that it's a triangle between Boot Rose Street and Paley Pike. You have the government building.
Mhm.
You have the restaurants that we have. Peppermill, the Chinese restaurant, the pizza place.
Mhm.
We have the 2 coffee shops, Wawa and Dunkin' Donuts, who's probably selling more coffee than anybody else. We have the school.
Yeah.
We do have the Newtown Apartments. We have the drugstore, the gas station. We have everything right in this area. Our town center is not just the Paley Pike. It's this
It's a
triangle and what's
Right.
associated with it.
And I agree, right now, I think that this really is our town center. Why does there have to be development on the other side of the street then? Can we just
Well,
keep it to this one side of the street?
Currently, we have on the other side of the street, we have a CVS, a school, a realtor's office, and a dentist's office across the
Right.
street. I'm just suggesting, when people use the term town center, you need to make sure everybody's defining it the same way. And I understand what they built down in Devon, but I think I don't think that's the town center of Devon. I would think people down in Devon would take exception that be the town center.
And they're still working on it.
Yeah.
Their planning commission
Yeah.
right now is working on a Devon Center. What is Devon Center?
Yeah.
And then what is the town center for Devon? That's
Well,
very controversial.
I just wanted to know if that was a possibility, if it could, it's really not.
No.
Okay, I was just thinking location wise, it's kind of a nice location wise.
It would be, but it would be next to impossible.
Okay, that's right, thank you.
But you're visioning and thinking, and I appreciate that.
So, I think a lot of the comments are good comments.
Do you have a?
Oh, I'm sorry. So I think a lot of the comments are good comments, and Michelle's comment just led me to think about, imagine that we were gathered here to look at TND1 for Goshen Village. We probably would pop the champagne bottle. So as you're thinking about what would happen next, it is the best of the 12 ordinances I read. We come through it 9 times. If you just created TND1 on Goshen Village, you have all of the best text and design guidelines, and you can decide later to be somewhere else. So all I'm saying is, if the cumulative effect of these comments cause you concern, and you want to either defer, table, think about it, whatever, one of the possibilities is to change the map and have a smaller TND1. There is absolutely nothing that would hurt Goshen Village. It wouldn't hurt anybody in the room. It would just add value. So that's.
Tom, doesn't that defeat the purpose of bringing the trail closer to
It
the
might, but
stores?
what I'm concerned about is what I said at the first public meeting, that when this TND concept gets adopted, it should be celebratory and it shouldn't be contentious. And what's happened over time is people have said all the negative things about it without looking at what some of the positive benefits might be. And so if they're legitimate, try it for Goshen Village. There is nothing wrong with that. And then say, well, all the hard work that went into it at least landed one place.
Yeah, but Tom, the building next door with the lumber and whatever, the whole point of doing this now,
Oh, I agree.
instead of doing it next year or the year after when we're actually planning to make the improvements, was if that,
Yeah.
for example, if that property gets sold, we want it to agree with our vision of the trail and making the trail useful to the pedestrians and those people that are using it. If we just do it on Goshen Village, we lose the advantage of putting this in to protect ourselves in
I
case some of
agree.
these
I agree
properties.
100%. I'm all for you saying, we love it, we're gonna adopt it. But if I were the ship on the Titanic, I'm gonna steer away from the iceberg so I don't crash. And I said to the planning commission, they surprised the heck out of me, April 3rd. I said, I thought we were heading in the Titanic mode because the meetings just before April 3rd were so negative that when I sat out in my car and was crying over all the criticism I was getting, I thought, how am I gonna feel when I leave tonight? And after we spent 9 drafts on this, we're gonna hit the iceberg. I just don't feel like we're looking at it the right way. So I'm just throwing that out as one other option. I know it's a limited option, but there's nothing injurious about this. But if you're concerned and you don't feel like voting yes, all I'm saying is maybe there's a smaller area that you would think of, that's all.
I, for one, am feeling the celebratory comments.
Hi, I'm Allison Joyce, 704 Red Maple. So a few different points. One, well, thank you for your time and for your expertise. You said, like, we were talking about trying to make this trail more attractive to pedestrians. I don't walk in places that there aren't trees. Like, if you want to make a trail attractive to pedestrians, attractive to people who want to be outside and enjoying this, you don't need stores, you need trees, you need green spaces. So,
And I'm sorry,
oh no, you can.
I was just addressing that one point. We do have plans for trees and green spaces.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, well, yeah, sorry, I'm looking at this and all I see are like 10 new parking spaces for a trail that's supposed to be encouraging walking. And then,
Yeah, some of those improvements are built in to soften it as well and make it more aesthetically pleasing, physically pleasing.
Okay, next.
yeah, thank you. So I guess just to consider that, like,
Yes.
consider if you want more people to walk around. And then also the other thing is that you need a community that wants and values sustainable transport, right? I mean, you can drive an electric car, but at the end of the day, you're still using fossil fuels. If you want sustainable transport, you need to walk. So you need to get the community on board with that. And I think a walking trail will really help that. I just don't know that all the extra shops and all the extra attractions that may help lower our taxes, but aren't going to actually help our community really enjoy itself more, because we'll, at the end, like, once you start, I mean, you made a good point with those bike trails through, remote parts of Minnesota, I think you said, but the bike trail goes in and then businesses follow. And then now that there's businesses there, now it's an ideal place to build housing developments. And now that there's housing developments, there's a bigger market for more businesses. So the more you build, the more you build. So if we open this up to building, we will, in 50 years, have more buildings,
We don't have any more.
Well, I see that. I thought that already, but here we are.
No, I mean, as far as, we're hoping that the trail will bring more pedestrians, and that we will, that will bring us to the town center, and it will encourage walking and biking and whatever. But unlike Minnesota, with all we have no more room for houses and stuff. We're pretty much built out of it.
So then do we need to change the zoning if we're already built out?
Well, the zoning had to do with just this one area, this one specific area.
It's along the corridor just to create some additional opportunities along this corridor. That's what this overlay district, and a developer, an entrepreneur can come in and not take any of them and say, well, I'm not interested in any of this. I'm going to use the base zoning to do what I'm already allowed to do. This just creates a few more opportunities that starts to set up, Tom, a feeling of town center use opportunities. That's what really the overlay is, isn't it?
All of the uses in C2 and C5 have been on the books for 50 years.
Yeah.
We just added residential, so you could add houses if you wanted to.
And some design standards.
Yeah.
Yes, which are
I mean, as
important.
far as
That's
the
important.
uses, the only uses we added were residential.
But there's only so much area that can be developed. It's not as if we're, a small town that's got a huge geography and only a little bit developed and it can expand in anything. We are, relatively speaking, built out
Gotcha. So,
in large part.
okay. I'll close for now, I think, but yeah, my biggest concern is that the more you build, the more you build. Like, when you build more shops, somebody inevitably comes along with a really sweet deal that's like, oh, but I can squeeze these however many, and I mean, you guys have, like you were saying, that you blocked some high density housing units, so thank you. But I mean, eventually somebody's gonna come in with too sweet of a bargain, and we're gonna be like, oh, well, we're really strapped for cash, so we're gonna do it.
So if anybody were to come in with a change in zoning that would allow that, we would have public meetings and everybody would be invited to come and put in their 2 cents.
But
Yeah,
your point is well taken.
Yeah.
Well taken.
And I've like these public meetings, you know, like I mean, I put in my 2 cents against the Sunoco pipeline, but that didn't do much. So like,
You
so,
can't control
which
that.
I know we can't control, I'm not trying to tangent off of that, but I'm just saying that,
Sense in,
yeah.
even though we weren't able to help a whole lot. Sorry about that.
Yeah, but, I'm sorry.
And if you're interested in sustainability, we've developed this sustainability advisory committee in the public meetings. You're welcome to join us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We just met on.
Monday.
Oh,
Thank you
yes,
very
today's
much for your
Tuesday.
input.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Brian Sweet, 646 Meadow Drive. There's been a lot of great discussion tonight about the vision. I think I've heard a lot of back and forth and people learning more about the plan and what it could be. I think East Goshen does need a vision for what we want it to be. The vision could be do nothing. I don't know if that's the right one, but I think it's like David, you said before, that vision has got us what we have today. We've got the pepper mill and the abandoned Swiss farms and the logging splitting place, and that's the free market. Free market is going to do that, and we could say, well, we're just going to let the free market randomly come in and shape the future of our community. I don't think that's the way we should do it. I think we should be proactive in deciding how we want our community to be. We could create a vision that severely limits the development, and that's one thing we could talk about it, or it could be the other way. We have something more like we saw tonight.
So now, if I could, just point of clarification, if I could. So what I just heard saying that you may be sort of in favor of changing the zoning and doing it and be done with it, or doing one of the overlays, or doing one of the baby overlays to see how it works. I'm just trying to get an idea of what your conversation is
The
around.
overlay seems like that's the way to do it, so you can encourage what happens in the future. You don't have to dictate it today. You can allow for that to come in when the opportunity presents itself.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
Yeah, in reality, Adam Smith's free market never really existed. It's a thought experiment that never really worked. And if you look at history, what worked is a free market with rational control and regulations, and that's what we're talking about. So that's
Thank you.
Hello.
Good evening, I'm Alexander Perot, 1416 Grand Oak Lane, and thank you for having this meeting. I have a few points that I want to make, and let me make them, and then you may comment. Thank you. First of all, I don't know why we need a trail. We have such a lovely trail in East Goshen, but I'd like to know who's going to pay for this trail. You may comment on that later. I agree with you, Mr. Batavia, that we really don't want to look like Kennett Square or Westchester. I mean, that's not really what East Goshen is all about. And we have a shopping center that I frequent. I go frequently to Patello's, to the nail salon, and the dry cleaner. So we do have a shopping center. I would not like to see a lot of stores along this trail that will build up our area. And frankly, I don't know why we need so many restaurants, and you're not going to get a gelato at a restaurant. So that confused me. So I just wanted you to comment on how we're paying for this trail.
Why don't I, so first of all, the construction of the trail, at least from segment C, which is Reservoir Road, all the way until Line Road at the Willistown border, that's all paid for. All of the construction is paid for from grants. We have 5 or 6 grants that we've received from a variety of sources, federal, state, and even a county grant. The engineering is essentially complete. That was paid for from the proceeds of the 2017 series of general obligation bonds. We're a AAA rated community. We've got the lowest possible interest rate available to any municipality because of our residents and as well as the management of the township. But something that we all talked about at length for about 2 years ago, we were paying 2.71% on those. So that was a real feather in our cap. Financially in Chester County. So that's it in a nutshell. Most of the costs are construction costs, but there is a lot of engineering that goes into it, utility relocation, rights of way, things like that, but all of that stuff has been paid for. The things that are outstanding are grant supported.
Let me mention that West Goshen's comprehensive plan that they just redid has the capability of connecting with our trail and using a series of trails and cartways will take you into downtown Westchester. So you'll be able to get on a bicycle in East Goshen, ride into Westchester, have a beer at the Iron Hill Brewery, and ride home if you're feeling it. And I think that's pretty exciting, the way to connect our town in a pedestrian-friendly, bicycle-friendly way with a quasi-metropolitan area with all the resources that you have in Westchester. So just bring that up as an advantage for our trail. A lot of people thought of the trail as a 2.7 mile isolated trail to nowhere. But when you think about what's going on with the connectivity both to our east and west, and by the way, to the east, the plan is to then connect to the Patriot Trail, which will connect to the Schuylkill River Trail. So again, you'll be able to ride from East Goshen down to Philadelphia, all on trails, out of traffic. So that's the vision. That's what we're really trying to do.
Your answer to that question, I'm getting out of the financial end of it. I was a little bit torn on the trail system because I obviously would not be a heavy user, but I have to think of the future. I have to think of when, it could be 6 months, it could be 5 years, that I will be moving on. Well, moving to another location or a smaller house. The millennials coming in, which are the age below us, they like that, and it keeps the values of the properties higher. They want the trails, they use the trails. I'm not saying we don't. David is he's amazing with his bicycling like others are, but it's a segment of the population that uses it. A lot of population do not, but to stay, in my opinion, to stay competitive in the future and to keep East Goshen a premier township with high residential prices and everything as good as we can do it, you gotta offer these services. If not, they're going to go elsewhere. So it's sort of a marketing for the township is where I came down on the decision of the trail. Again, you can see by the shape of me that I don't do like a whole lot of biking. But I would take a little drive and take a little park, walk a little park. Quite frankly, by the time I take my grandkids to the park, I'm stripped. I can't do anything.
I just think that there will be a lot of trees, as was mentioned, and not a lot of buildings along this trail.
I don't disagree.
And keep in mind, there's only two underutilized parcels left. Or is it one on the corner, one across the street and one up by one lot. Basically, the other buildings either have businesses in them or a school or occupied, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, thanks for taking our concerns.
Your name, please?
Elisa Moser, 1608 Heron Lane. I've been a resident of Westchester for 31 years. I grew up on the main line. I absolutely love it here. The traffic on the main line was very stressful. Getting from one town to the next could take as much as a half hour. Stores are everywhere, traffic, people pulling out all the time. I like it here, I like the taxes. Paoli Pike, I always think of it as like, I go to see my parents, I take Paoli Pike to go there. But I always think of Paoli Pike like as a major artery to like get on like 352, like, 30, Boot Road to 202. I don't see it as whereas downtown Westchester, it's basically Gay and Market, or Malvern, it's just King Road or King Street, and there's like no other arteries there. Here, I just think it would, and Paoli Pike is one lane. It doesn't have an emergency lane either. So I think that it would just cause more and more traffic. And regarding that shopping center, I think a lot of times, there's Hertz car rental there. So all those cars there, the majority of them are from the rental store. That Master P's was there for a few years, and he had.
Can I say something in closing?
Certainly.
I don't want anybody, including my patriot David, to think that I'm a negative thinker. I think it's a good idea to do something. I don't think at the scale that we're looking at, in my opinion, is the best for East Goshen now, possibly in the future. I really like the baby step feature. As a personal opinion, this is not a vote. I could change my vote either way by the time we come to a vote, because I will have more information. I'm just bringing up information that I got tonight that I thought was very important. If I have trouble making a decision, I always choose smaller rather than larger. That's been like one of my life's advantages or disadvantages. I do like the thought of the baby step that we're talking about. If we elect to go that way, if we elect to go to the full overlay and the board so wishes and we come to a final vote, I would want more public input, meetings specifically designed so that people get more up to date, which I know we would have. I just think East Goshen, here's a personal reflection. I think East Goshen is careful right now. We are really overextending. And I don't say just financially, just what we're doing with the trails, what we're doing with what infrastructure we're trying to change. I think possibly at some point you need, as you would in business or in your personal lives, you need maybe to step back for a little bit and take a breath. Basically, that's my opinion just from a long, old resident. But I think it's all good, more public input, and we go from there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, this was just an informational meeting where we got information from Tom Committee and from the residents. We will take this up again at probably our next meeting, or if there's time.
Well, I think the suggestion is that tonight's meeting was explained to make sure the board understood what
Right.
was involved. So now I think you need to reflect and decide
Yeah.
if and whether you want to do something with it.
And if we decide to go forward, then we need to have it reviewed by,
Well, no, I think the planning commission suggested that if you decide it has some merit to move forward, the next step would be to send a letter out to everybody,
okay,
have a big meeting, and because again, the purpose tonight was to try and answer your questions.
Well, what I wanted to ask, planning commission members that are here, Brad, Ernie, is Ernie still here? John,
I didn't even
okay.
say Brad.
Planning commission members are here, just the three, Ernie, where's Dan? Dan, where are you hiding? Oh, there you are. Based upon what you, gentlemen have heard tonight, would you like to take these thoughts, these comments back and discuss it amongst the commission members?
I think that's a decision for the board to make at this point.
Okay. All right.
And so, I would like, our board members will consider it and we'll decide what the next step is going to be.
That's agreed.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
And thank you, everybody, for coming out
Okay,
tonight.
motion is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Have a nice 4th, everybody, and be safe.
And Community Day is on Saturday. Great day in East Goshen Park.